Hi again, Math 95. So this is the second video for the Chapter 1 notes. And I'm actually going to skip over the next portion. A lot of that should be review from Math 90. All of this should be, but that really should be. There are a lot of videos on Lumen for that, and my completed notes will be up there also, and we can also talk about that a little bit more on Thursday. I think it'll be a little better if you kind of bring your questions on that to me rather than me just going through all of that at once. The one thing I do want to mention, just to make sure you remember, is that when you are adding numbers, so we're talking about integers, which we know means positive and negative. So when we are talking about adding integers, let's think about what happens with those positives and negatives. So if I have 4 plus negative 3, okay? Think about having little chips. Sometimes if we're in class, I hand out little chips that are yellow on one side and red on the other. So if I have 4 that are positive and 3 that are negative, okay, it kind of looks like this. Now we need to put this together. Well, every time I have a positive and a negative, they cancel out. It's like taking one step forward and then one step back. So every time I have a pair of positives and negatives, they're going to cancel each other out. Okay. In this case, I'm left with 1 positive. Why am I left with positives? Well, there were more positives than negatives to begin with, so I know my answer is going to be positive. And if I think about just how many, forget about the sign for a minute. If I have 4 positives and 3 negatives, well, 3 of these positives are going to be taken away by the 3 negatives. 4 minus 3 is going to leave me with 1. So my answer is just positive 1. Okay. If I have negative 8 plus 5. Okay. Well, again, I have 5 positives. Oops. And I'm going to have 8 negatives. Okay. We should be able to look at this and at the very least, know how many or know what kind of answer I'm going to have. Well, I have more negatives than positives, so the negatives are going to be the leftovers. How many more? I have 3 more. So if I match these up, those all cancel out. This is what I have left, 3 negatives. My answer is going to be negative 3. Okay. What if I have negative 3 plus negative 4? Well, now I have 3 negatives and 4 negatives. People always want to say a negative and a negative is a positive. That's only when we're multiplying or dividing. When we're adding, look at what happens here. Does anything cancel out? No. I have a pile of negatives, another pile of negatives. I just shove them together, and I have a bigger pile of negatives. I have 7 negatives now. Okay, so take some time with those questions and with those little videos, and we can talk about any of that you want during class on Thursday, or you can email me ahead of time, of course. So I'm going to share my screen with the notes again and go into the order of operations section. I have page 6 of the notes, order of operations. I've written in here what each of these stand for. So you may have heard of a little word, made up word, PEMDAS, to remember the order of operations, or you may remember a little saying, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or you may never have heard of either of those, and that's fine. We have an order of operations. What that means is that we've agreed that anytime we are faced with an expression like this one, for example, that has a lot of different operations, plus, minus, multiplying, exponents, we have this order that we're going to do them in that order. Okay, why do we have that? Well, otherwise, if I gave this to 8 different people, I'd probably get 8 different ways they want to do it. Someone might say, I want to do subtraction first. Someone else might say, oh, I love division. I'm going to start with that. Someone else might say, oh, I know 4 times 2. I'm going to start with that. If we did it in different orders, we'd get different answers. So we want to have this order of operations. It's just a set of rules saying, here's what we're going to agree, that we're going to do this in order every time so we get the same answers, okay? So we do anything in parentheses first. Now, in some examples like this one, there's nothing actually to do in these parentheses. It's just kind of keeping that negative with the 7, okay? Sometimes, let's see if like here, there's an operation within the parentheses. We would do that first. Then after we've done parentheses, we do anything with an exponent or a root. So if we have a square root, cube root, we won't get into it here. You'll get into it in Math 120, but another way to write a root is as a fractional exponent. Like a square root is actually like an exponent of a half. So that's why they're together. They're really the same thing. Now here's where things get tricky. People say, well, M comes first in PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So that must mean that I do the multiplication first and then the division. And that's not quite true. These two are equal, okay? I could have put the D first and then the M. We're going to do multiplication or division next, whichever happens from left to right, okay? So if my division is first, if I'm a little bug walking from left to right across my expression, whichever of these two I get to first, I do. And then I keep going, keep doing all the multiplication and the division, but I go from left to right. Same thing with addition and subtraction. Addition doesn't always happen first. Here, for example, once I've done the other stuff, this subtraction is going to happen before the addition, because if I'm a little bug, I'm going to get to this subtraction first. Okay, so that's really important to remember about those two. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go ahead and try this question right here. Now, if you haven't reviewed the exponent stuff yet, by the time you're looking at this, I will remind you that anything to the 0 power equals 1. So this whole part right here is going to be 1. So at the end, you're going to have plus 1. Okay, and that's going to be the first thing you do, because there's nothing really to do in the parentheses, but there's my exponent. I'm also going to tell you that you want to rewrite the entire problem every time. So, for example, after your first step, you're going to have 14 minus 5 plus 3 minus 16 divided by 4 times, well, okay, for right now, I'll just put that in there, times 2 plus 1, okay? That's going to be my next step. Everything stayed the same except for this guy. Now I figure out, what do I do next? And then in the next step, I write out everything the same except for whatever I did next. So think about, we didn't have parentheses. We did exponents. We don't have any more exponents or roots. What comes next? Multiplication or division, going from left to right. Okay, so go ahead and take a minute and try that one. Okay, so hopefully now you're done with that one. And let's go ahead and look at it up here on the board. Okay, so here we have our problem. Excuse me. So we know that the first step was going to be this 7 to the 0 power, or negative 7, sorry. The 0 power is going to be 1. Okay. Then I go through and we decided that the next thing is going to be multiplication or division from left to right. Well, my division right here is what comes first, left to right. So I'm going to rewrite everything up to that point. I have a negative 16 divided by 4. If you remember from multiplying and dividing negatives, if they have different signs, it's going to be negative. So minus 4 times 2 plus 1. Again, everything else gets written out. If you just start writing random answers to things without writing everything out, I can almost guarantee you're going to get yourself confused. Multiplication comes next, right? We're still in that multiplication or division step. We have to go through into the multiplication. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Now I just have addition and subtraction. I'm going to work left to right. 14 minus 5 is 9. 9 minus 3 is 12. 12 minus 8 is 4. And 4 plus 1 is 5. Okay, so see how I did it really neatly every single step. All right, take a few minutes and try each of the other 3 in the notes. And some questions will come up to prompt you to put your answers in when you're done with them, and you can check your answers. All right, so the next, after you do those on there, after you have done those, then you can go ahead and the next video will go on to the next portion of the notes. Thank you.